Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Thursday book launch. I'm Malika Albrecht, the founding editor of Redheaded Stepchild. And tonight we are very excited to be celebrating with Jenny Molberg. And this is something that I've been looking forward to all week, The Court of No Record. And if you want to hold up the book for a moment, Bob was holding it up earlier. And I know he's got it right. Yeah, there we go. The Court of No Record. So I'm going to read a brief, thank you, Jenny, a brief bio. And I wanted to say that there's a link in the chat section. You can go buy the book, and there is instant gratification if you're like me and you don't want to wait. You can download the PDF. Jenny Molberg is the author of 3 poetry collections: Marvels of the Invisible, which was the winner of the Berkshire Prize, Tupelo Press in 2017. Refusal, LSU Press, much like The Court of No Record. Refusal came out in 2020, and The Court of No Record 2023. She has received fellowships and scholarships. There's somebody in the waiting room. You got it?
Yep.
Sorry about that. She has received fellowships and scholarships from National Endowment for the Arts, the Sewanee Writers Conference, Vermont Studio Center, and Longleaf Writers Conference. Her work has recently appeared or is forthcoming from Plowshares, Vita, the Missouri Review, the Rumpus, Oprah Quarterly, and other publications. We were just talking about where she is now. She is the Associate Professor of Creative Writing at the University of Central Missouri, where she directs Pleiades Press and co-edits Pleiades magazine. You can find Jenny online at jennymolberg.com, and I put that in the link so you can see the spelling, and also on Twitter. Jenny, thank you so much for being here and letting us celebrate this book with you.
Malika, thank you so much for inviting me to do this. I'm excited. This is actually the first time that I will read from this book, so this is really special. I'm excited, maybe a little nervous too. But thank you, and thanks, Redheaded Stepchild. I'm very grateful to be here, and I'm also really looking forward to the open mic. I'm excited to hear all of your work as well. So I want to start this reading with a content warning, as I'm going to be addressing issues of gender-based violence and domestic abuse. So please, if there's anything you need to do to make yourself feel safe, if this is a triggering subject, please feel free to do so. So the other night, I had the incredible experience of hearing Naomi Shihab Nye, one of my heroes, read. And she said something that really resonated me. She said that her childhood dream was to write a poem, put it out into the world, and that someone very, very far away would read that poem and then they would be friends. I identify with that feeling a lot because poetry has brought me so many important friendships, several of whom are here. I'm looking at their faces. And I think when I was writing this book, the stakes became a little higher for me. As I was struggling with PTSD from abuse, I needed to write these poems. And I think I also needed to feel or be believed, not necessarily by others, but I needed to believe myself. I needed to write these poems to unravel this sort of internalized gaslighting that I've been living with for years. So I wanted to start the reading with a poem dedicated to my dear friend who went through a lot of this trauma with me, to whom the book is also dedicated, Pooja. And so I just kind of want to start by saying, please believe women, believe victims. So this first poem is for Pooja, her testimony. I let go of her hand, turning blue. We have been in court 8 hours. Between our hearts, a tether, a leash. When she cries, I cry. A doggy sound, a cat too high in a tree, curled about the night from the inside out. When she describes her abuse, the lawyer says, again, Your Honor, not relevant, Your Honor. At the plaintiff's table, laughter erupts. Was there coerced sex in your relationship? The lawyer asks. Yes, she says. We are killing a lot of trees, the lawyer says, handing over the evidence. I channel my night vision, pitch its green across the room. The honorable answer says, You must understand that sometimes people are in different phases of their journey with abuse. I am strapped to my chair. I bark from the forest floor. I disappear the wooden witness stand. The court does not care. The court will open the wound, will fill it with paper. So this next poem that I'm going to read is the first poem in the book. And it responds both to personal experience and also to an active serial killer who was active while I was living in Baton Rouge when I was in college at LSU. And with this book, I think one of my sort of missions was to confront our cultural obsession with true crime and violent men, and to focus instead on the lives of victims. So this is May the Stars Guide You Safely Home. After I call the cops to ask for a protective order, I read about the girlfriend of a serial killer. What she knew, what she didn't. How it seems we're always punished for asking questions. America is watching a show about a man who is fascinating. His eyes ice behind the fog of his glasses. Such a nice guy, such a quiet guy. The flooded house. I don't care about him. I want to say their names. Anne Bryan, Catherine Ann Hall, Hardy Schmidt, Joyce Williams, Lillian Robinson, Marilyn Nevels, Johnny Mae Williams, Donna Bennett Johnson. When I call the cops, I hold my arm like a seatbelt. When I call the cops, a woman answers, hand over chest like an elementary school lie, the pledge, the flag, the wrong math. The girlfriend rode in the car and didn't know about the woman in his trunk. Not 2 people there, but 3. When I call the cops, the officer speaks like an aunt. Honey, don't you know this only makes it worse? The law provokes a split tongue made of amendments. As a child, I used to dream of walking down my city street, past the newspaper stand, to our corner house with its porthole window, the garage that spilled open like a mouth. I'd ring the doorbell and another mother would answer, her children like impressions of me. I thought I lived there. The system is turning me to sand. Honey, if I were you, I'd sit tight, get a gun. The killer's girlfriend killed a man once. The author of the book about the killer said she likes the feeling of being desired. He might as well say she was asking for it. A biker in a Sons of Silence jacket broke a pool cue over the girlfriend's back, so she fought, and then she was fighting not a man, but an idea, not one thing, but many, and then the man was dead. She carried his photo in his wallet for years. We're watching the show of America because we want to win. To win means kill and not be killed. This helps the system. The court believes the bad actor. Before I call the cops, I call a domestic abuse advocacy center. They say conflict of interest. They say he got there first. I try to say it's all backwards. I try to say, please listen to me. The night of the hearing, I awake thinking I am the girlfriend, the silence of the trunk and ocean. It takes hours to rise, to gather myself part by part, pulling the truth from the dark. This is my face. This is my name. Someone loves me. My voice is animal in the courtroom microphone. Behind the judge, the sideways prison of the flag. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna give y'all a little break from looking at my face and show you some images, which I think are really interesting. So let me share my screen real quick. Okay, can y'all see that? Okay, this is Frances Glessner Lee. Some of you all might be familiar with her and her work. She was one of America's first female forensic scientists, and she also started the nation's first forensic pathology program at Harvard. Police were brought to the program for crime scene training. So Lee constructed dioramas. Some people might call them dollhouses, although she wouldn't have liked that word. And I'll show you some images of them as I read these next two poems. These poems are in response to her crime scene dioramas. And these were documented by the photographer Corinne May Botts in her fantastic book. I highly recommend it if you're interested in this kind of thing. It's called The Nutshell Studies of Unexplained Death. The pink bathroom. Rose Fishman found dead in her home, March 31st, 1942. A crime scene constructed by Frances Glessner Lee, an investigation training exercise for detectives. Rose Fishman is a doll. Rose Fishman is the reflection of a doll in the pink bathroom's mirror. Rose Fishman is dressed like an old woman in the pink bathroom's mirror. Rose Fishman hated her old womanness, so ended it. Or Rose Fishman was ended by a man, because a man hates the girls of his mind, his own mother reflected in the injured glass. Why must she be a mirror? He wants you to look at his hate through her eyes in the mirror. Rose Fishman is just a doll, dressed like an old woman, painted to look like she is dead. Burnt umber for the purge fluids, pointillismed with the smallest paintbrush under the fishbowl of a magnifying glass, the cloth body, the robe and envelope, the tangle of the doll's triangled arms, extra stuffing for ankle bloat, black hair askew, the eyes can't see. Rose Fishman is captured in the pink bathroom, cops mooning their pearly cheeks over the surface of her privacy. Pink crinoline curtains, pink tiebacks, the round pink rug, a fringed bandage, salmon marbled sink and the mirror, and rose in the mirror, roses and fish repeating until everything is rip curl of roses and fish in the vanity mirror, the sink mirror, door mirror, and through the closed window, the waves pound their whitening fists. This is the whirlpool of self-hate. Rose Fishman in her standstill age, the cops studying women like painted relics, ogling through glass, their distorted fish eyes, hundreds blinking. Rose Fishman cared about her slippers. Rose Fishman perfectly folded her pink towels. Rose Fishman was found this way by the doorman, her mail collecting dust, her powder puff, her doilies, her pink fishbowl. The real Rose Fishman hated doilies. Let us honor the facts. Rose Fishman wore a blue robe. Rose Fishman was neither rose nor fish, was the water, so Rose Fishman is everywhere. Okay, so this next scene is called The Red Bedroom, and this poem is kind of in response to that. And it has an epigraph from Susan Stewart's On Longing, which reads, within, within, within. The miniaturist. Cops in their badges and high and tight haircuts squat to peer inside her dollhouse. She wants them to. She wants them to see the overturned chair, white knit bare, the size of a child's toe. She teaches them to read a body. Cigarettes rolled with receipt paper, the kiss of pink on the underside of a pillow, a clue. What do you expect her to hate about herself? I think I see Frances, large hands under a jeweler's loop, screwing a toothpick into a weather vane, yarning a sewing wheel, making dead women smaller so she can save them. She stretches linoleum across her little kitchen. It's 1947. She destroys what is painstaking, blowtorches the roof, plants a bottle of Seconal. The pharmacist's name, small as a line of ants. tuft of Siberian weasel in the ferrule of her paintbrush. I am a mirror as I rest beneath her gravestone, the biographer writes. I must hate the woman they keep telling me to be, I think, peering into Frances, so I can become what I might be. I am diffusing. There is a fuse in me in the shape of a brush. Stop making me sexual. Stop calling me mine. My quilt is edged in rickrack. My glass of whiskey a thimble full of sap. Pet milk and little cans on the sill. I wake in the red bedroom with bangles on my wrists and the old thought creeps in again. I do not recognize my life. I do not recognize these small woven socks, my gauzy nightgown, my hands that move like mittens. There is blood on my clothes and in my hair. No, it is nail polish. My windows are plastic. My hands are in my hair. The noose is made of cooking twine. A man is looking in. Okay, I'm back. Thanks for going with me on that journey. Let's see. Just gonna read a few more poems. I'm gonna read the first poem of the middle section of the book, which is the title section. And I call these poems docu-confessional because I used the nearly 400-page court transcript as the documentary material for these poems, but it was also my own court hearing, so there's confessional element to these poems. But long story short, my friend and I were brought to court by our abuser, the same man, because we spoke out about our experience with abuse and our friendship that grew out of it. For evidence, he had one of her social media posts and my poems. So the case was dismissed, but he appealed, and I kept having to go back to court again and again. And that was re-traumatizing and financially draining and emotionally draining. And so this book kind of rose out of that experience. And I read that it's common for abusers to continue their abuse against their victims within the court system. And I don't think that's something that we talk about enough. And so I kind of wanted to bring that into conversation as well. Our justice system needs to do better to protect victims and to believe victims of abuse. Proceedings. The honorable answer offers me the option to reset my court date due to his personal relationship with my abuser's mother. I have driven halfway across middle America, through rhinestone-studded stampedes in the great dripping caves of the Bible Belt to Broken Mirror County. Broken Mirror, where I was once thrown in a room with a pit bull. The dog slept with his sweet paw around me and breathed his panicky breath into my neck. To say me is a stretch. The self was a rock blown into many rocks, sparkling and hot. The alpha made of me a souvenir. He put me in a box he occasionally opened, then vanished me in the palm of his hand. Whereupon the following proceedings are heard in the court of no record. To say heard is a stretch. To say stretch is a lie. My pleated pants are drenched in sweat as my abuser's lawyer, in her wrinkled skirt and ruffled sweater, heckles me into a corner. To say coroner is generous, because in the court of no record, where the abuser is petitioner and the victim respondent, the walls are made of ideas, so the men can walk straight through them. I'll just read a few more. I wanted to read a couple of these little evidence poems. And if you can see, these are written in the cinquain form, which is a 5-line form invented by the great and unsung poet, Adelaide Crapsey. So I wrote these poems to fill in the blanks, the evidence of abuse that we suffered that the judge would not allow in court. Evidence. Her thighs, out of nowhere, purple blossoms surfaced. Eruptions, as if no one had struck her. Evidence. The beach, A dusk became me. Next thing, a star fell. Her limbs and head, its 5 points. Small black hole. Evidence. I taped to her mirror a note. He thinks I am beautiful. She ripped it. The bitch ripped me. Okay, speaking of bitches, I thought I'd end us on a little bit of a lighter note. So I'll read 2 more poems. The last section of the book has a series of bitch poems. And what I was trying to do with these poems is not just reclaim the word bitch, but also really unpack the internalized misogyny of thinking that I was a bitch. And thinking that I was a bitch for, I don't know, standing up for myself, having a voice, claiming my selfhood. Okay. Bitch monitoring your phone. I am a citizen detective. I am a sleuth. Now that I know where you are, I do not care. What shall I call my wave-colored moon? How will I occupy it? Where will I erect my flag? The blue tracker dot waits in the red traffic. Don't come near me, little blue dot. May every sad woman see herself in a mirror. May she believe what she sees. I was too afraid to see that I have always been brave. Okay, so just one more poem, and thank y'all again for being here. I can't wait to hear your poems. This poem is all one sentence, but it's quite long, so forgive me if I get breathless. This comes from a real experience of being at Dairy Hollow Writers Colony in Arkansas. Bitch interrupts a wedding. A black and blue pipevine butterfly noses the collars of orange zinnias. Something someone might write a poem about. Someone who isn't a bitter bitch. Or most likely a man with nothing else to do but splooge his sensitive musings down a pavement paved with fancy names for insects or plants or birds. Oh, swoon, red-banded hair-streak butterfly. Oh, sigh and hark the yonder black-eyed Susans, the Rudbeckia subtomentosa, the nighthawk, and the dick sissel. And I stop by the cave trickle of a natural spring where air is cold as a winter tongue, or calyx outstretched hand, or some bullshit, sidestepping the bikers who have stopped to smooch in the grotto, hand over my mouth because I have forgotten my mask. So that now, ambling down the charming Victorian Ozarkian streets, I appear to be in a constant state of shock, gasping into my own hand. And actually, I am in a constant state of shock. As I had long ago decided that the universe could only really push a person so far. That if there was no God, at least the world possessed a kind of omniscient fairness, a cosmic balance, trees leaning into wind, meaning in the goo of the chrysalis that turns to prismatic wings. And with one hand over my mouth and the other on the hiking trail railing to guide my arthritic knee, I think, at least there's this lovely respite, gazing onto the green and dappled light, as 40 unmasked faces, weird little forest moons, crank upwards, an ivory dress and bridesmaid blue, fall flowers and pews in an aisle. And I hear the minister saying, "And now I pronounce you," as the bride in her sparkling white lace waits patiently for this bitch to stop ruining the moment her life will begin forever. And I blubber back up the stairs, picking a piece of mossy bark from my ponytail, and the sun prisms my arms, and a passing hawk darkens the afternoon for just a moment. And I am young, and I am breathing, and praise Ozark Jesus, I am the interruption, and not the wanted moment that will pass. Thank you.
Holy smokes. People, if y'all want to unmute, please do. You can understand why this is called gorgeous poetry of witness.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a lot of speechless
Yeah.
people in this moment. There are so many claps in the, praise those
Wow.
archies. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jenny. Thank you for
Thanks.
writing it. Thank you for celebrating with us. Thank you for sharing
Yeah.
your work.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you for listening and being here with me.
And I think also the other thing that at LSU site, they say, that this work really looks towards a future of positive systemic reformation, and how necessary and how important to start talking about it. Yeah, Ruben just wrote congratulations on the new collection. You're going to have a blast looking through this chat section. There's a lot of stuff in there. If people want to unmute and ask questions, ask about, Jenny's process, or, I have to tell you, I was trying to think of like how you structure, and there's this build up, and you work on several different levels, which I find fascinating. There's like the embodiment, the way you describe things that immediately goes into my body. And then the power of your words and the way you look at certain things. I mean, the prison of the flag. I mean, it was mind blowing for me. I was having almost a moment where I couldn't keep up. There was so much that I wanted to respond to. Yep. Talk about courage. Often we are reluctant to write the truth. I can't imagine having to defend the truth when an abuser takes you to court. Courage. That was from Donna. Yes.
Thanks.
And we don't talk about how that is true. And that that a lot of abusers use the kids in court and are often going for custody as an extension of the abuse. And we don't talk enough about that. So feel free to jump in and ask questions, or just offer praise. I mean, I think that makes sense. I feel that too. So I do want to ask, how did this come together? I mean, the interweaving of the docu confessional, I thought that was very effective, very powerful, added a whole nother layer of like, the historic impact of abuse and misogyny internalized, and how we struggle with that. And I felt like it was so many voices speaking at once that also had impact on me listening to it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think one place where this started, and I think maybe there are a few starting points, but I mean, mostly I wrote this book during the pandemic. And I was, and still do, consume a lot of true crime. And I was thinking about how strange that is. And I still think about how strange it is. Like, why do I do this to myself? Or why do I feed these stories to myself? And I think that because I have dealt with violence, and I'm sure so many of us have in the past, I think that my sort of true crime obsession comes from a place of like hunger for information. I think my brain's always been like that. Like, if I have the facts, if I have the information, then I make myself safer. And I think, learning these true crime horror story, just terrible things, like maybe I was trying to figure out ways to find my own safety, and to avoid a darker destiny, I guess. And so that was one thing I was thinking about. And then I think the other thing is, like you said, Malika, like having to go to court and defend the truth, and also the truth being irrelevant to the situation, and it all being turned upside down and backwards. And it was just so frustrating. I was so lucky to have a friend with me for most of it. Because so many women aren't, and so many victims aren't. I mean, we would go to the court and just see a room full of people who were having to sit right next to people who had threatened their lives and their children's lives. And it's just horrifying. And I think I had a conversation with my lawyer, and I had this printed, giant transcript. And I said, what is this? What am I learning? What have I learned? Like, I don't, those situations where sometimes you go through something hard and you think, okay, I've learned something about myself. And this just didn't feel like that. It just felt like pointless and aggravating and re-traumatizing. And he's just looked at me and he said, do what you do best, make it into poems, And so I took the transcript home and I just worked through it. And I also tried to have a sense of humor, even though it's like, I think one thing that my mom always says is, "Oh, your poems are so sad, but you're such a funny person." And, and I think maybe I use poetry as an outlet for, darker feelings that are harder to work through. But yeah, I tried to sort of come at it and see the absurdity of the situation and be grateful um, for my safety. So, and that's kind of where the bitch series came. I started to kind of laugh at it all. And that was fun.
Huge
Just want to
fan.
say, I think that's the most powerful group of poems that I've ever heard.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Huge fan of the Reclaiming Bitch, and I kind of want t-shirts that have parts of that poem on it.
Well, I do have buttons, Malika. I'll send you some.
Dude, I need that.
Put them on your t-shirt.
But I do like the idea of the Jenny Molberg t-shirts, Reclaiming Bitch. I have to, Elizabeth just wrote, this book gives me the chills. It hits at the heart of victimization again and again by people in the system, a grand accomplishment. Yes. Can you talk a little bit about the cover?
Sure. Yeah. LSU Press they published my second book, Refusal, as well. And it really was kind of remarkable that they agreed to publish my books, because that's my alma mater. That's where I went to undergrad, and they didn't actually know that when they accepted my first book. And it just felt like coming home. They're wonderful to work with. And so they've given me a lot of freedom with my book covers. And so for Refusal, I knew the image, and I chose that one, and they designed it so beautifully. And for this one, I just kind of had more of an idea, and I thought, shredded paper, the destruction of evidence, because what's inside the book is trying to, reclaim that, make space for that, those truths of the stories that we don't listen to.
It's perfect. It's kind of the piecing of all that shredded stuff back together again and saying it matters.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. I can imagine, writing these poems, oftentimes you had to step in and step out. How did you do that? Just the process is really, I guess, what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think I was fortunate, because I know that the pandemic affected a lot of writers in the way that it became really difficult with parenting, just with the global crisis of the pandemic. It became difficult to write. Somehow it kind of allowed me space, I guess. And so I think going through the court transcript again and again did get triggering, traumatizing, which I think is why I did kind of step out and try to see some humor. And just, it was also, I think a lot of it is just like a fake it till you make it type experience, where I'm like, I'm going to be a badass, I'm going to reclaim, and I don't, I didn't always feel like that, but I love that poems can allow us kind of persona, or a voice that maybe that you want to inhabit, or that you dream that you inhabit. And I think that was part of the experience too.
Well, I think you do inhabit it, but I love that you got to test it out and sit in it. I say you are a badass.
Oh, thank you.
Just am, stunned and really, thank you so much. Okay, so we do have a question. Amber just said, I'd like to ask about the Alpha's attorney poems. I am struck by the biblical invocation weaponization. Can you talk about how you brought this in? Freaking fabulous question. Thank you for that.
Hi, Amber. Thank you. Yeah. So the attorney I didn't read any of these poems, but the attorney in the book, and the alpha is the abuser. I kind of gave everything code names and fictionalized, and the alpha's attorney speaks only in Bible verses. And I went and I just did Control F searches of the Bible for words like whore. Because I thought, that was kind of my experience. If I make it absurd, it felt like someone sort of weaponizing really, really old, entrenched, misogynistic viewpoints, and I don't think the entire Bible's like that by any means, but that like Old Testament kind of like oppression is how her presence felt to me. So I thought it might be funny to kind of dismiss what she actually said, because in reality it was ridiculous and absurd, and have her speak in this like old condemning voice.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. So Amber, did you want to talk about that? Like, how did it feel for you as a reader? And if I put you on the spot, don't worry, you don't have to answer. You don't have to unmute or talk. But I was curious if you had. Yeah, thank you.
Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay. I just found that such a powerful invocation, and I think that Jenny, it was very effective, because I felt like it was such absurd biblical language that was trying to bully, and it was also it was really powerful. So I just think it was really striking.
Thanks, Amber. Yeah, it felt ridiculous to me also for a woman to be like, I know it's her job, right? But like to be taking a position against women in this way, that was so confusing. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Yep. So many women buy into the gaslighting and begin to believe it, is what Donna just wrote. Yep.
Yeah.
I think it's very hard to step out of that,
Mhm.
gaslighting the self can be, something that you have to work through, because that starts to self-perpetuate.
Absolutely.
And it's hard to, going through it without somebody to remind you, no, this is what happened. I think it can be very challenging. And even with somebody to remind you, there is that slipping into, feeling guilty or bad.
Mhm.
Beautifully written. So I think it feels like to me that we just, oh, did I miss it? Thank you. Ron, jump in.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for the wonderful reading, Jenny.
Thank
I
you.
have two questions. Well, one is just a comment, and see if you have anything to say about it. But it just feels to me in my gut that men who've suffered abuse or trauma of their own might have feel more of a connection with your work and the sensibility behind the work. So I was wondering how you feel about that.
Yes, absolutely. I've thought about that a lot, and try to speak to it as much as I can, because I know that I sometimes use the word man in a way that enacts violence, and that's not necessarily always true. So I do, yeah. I think that my bigger concern is systemic misogyny, oppression, and abuse, and I think so many men do come from generational abuse. Some might perpetuate that abuse, some might not, and work on it and unravel it and do better, and I'm interested in that larger conversation about toxic masculinity and what it does to all of us.
Right. So my second question is kind of related, and having had an abusive father and who abused all of his family, the healing comes like super slow over decades and decades, and you have these little discoveries. And I was just wondering, in listening to your poetry, like in the process of writing, or the time that you were thinking about writing that stuff and, developing the sensibility to write those poems, whether you had any surprise discoveries that maybe were little threads that could go into the future and help your own healing.
That's such a good question. And first of all, I'm sorry to hear that you and your family went through that. One thing that I've found tremendously powerful is EMDR therapy. I don't know if you're familiar, but it's like a light sensory therapy where your brain makes associations and you kind of locate the connections of like your panic response to the root of where that came from. And to me, that process was so much like making a poem because it's really associative. And for me, at least, like imagistic. I would think about something that had happened recently that I was having like a panic or anxiety response to. And all of a sudden I would be 5 years old hiding under the sink. And I didn't understand where that came from, but it would just like bring me to tears. And then it would jump to, a moment with like a prank I pulled on my father, and I would start laughing. And I think like that associative process was important to the making of these poems. Some of them respond to dreams. I didn't really read any of those tonight, but also for a few years while I was making this book, I would just write down dreams, thoughts, images, things I had. And then I went back and I printed them out, and some of them were research on forensic science and things like that. And I printed them and I cut them all out with scissors. And so some of the poems in the book too are from that, like they're pasted from my journal, but together they kind of make this associative sense. And I think all of that was a process of healing. And like you said, it's a continuing process of healing.
Wow, am I glad you asked that question, Ron. The answer, that was fabulous to hear kind of all that went into that. And EMDR is, highly effective at helping us process trauma, and we, one of the things I do, there's also on horseback mounted EMDR practitioners.
Oh, really?
Yes, right? Because then you're being carried by someone that you develop a relationship with. You develop the relationship first before you're riding, and it's like being rocked as you process some stuff.
I want to try that.
I'll try to find you a clinician near you. We'll try that for you.
I would love that.
Eye movement desensitization. I'm trying to remember exactly what it stands for. My brain.
Eye movement desensitization. Wait, R.
I was going to say, I've got EMDR. Yeah, reprocessing. Thank you, Amber. My brain, I just stalled out on that. Yeah, fabulous. But
Amber's a therapist. Thank you, Amber.
Thank you. Bob, you had a question? Jump in.
No, repeat that again, EMDR.
So eye movement. Now I've lost
Desensitization, reprocessing.
Okay.
EMDR. Like I really have to translate it, but I'm an equine professional in mental health and learning, so I'm more about
Jenny,
eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Thank you, Amber.
Jenny, I haven't read. I read the first poem, as you know. When I told you. Has anybody read The Man Who Hated Women?
No.
This is not a new struggle, and it's about Comstock, the Comstock laws, and he went after pornography through the mail, and then about women who are instructing women how sex works. And at least two of the women he went after committed suicide because of the way he went after them. It's devastating to read. And as the book ends, she talks about what are the consequences of the last two members of the court for a return to the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century with this guy. Anyway, things are going back in some ways.
Yeah. Thank you. I've written that down. I'll definitely check it out.
Thank you, Bob.
Really good book.
Yes, Ron.
I have, one more. It's hard to hear your work, Jenny, without thinking to some extent of the controversial poem by Patricia Lockhart, is it? Rape Joke. And I think she takes makes a serious poem about rape as a joke, just to create that emotional tenor about that. And some people read it as quite feminist, and other people just say, look at the surface and say you don't want to make a joke about rape. And I was just wondering what you think of that, because I've done a lot of reading on her work and curious.
Well, it sounds like you might know more about her work than I do. I'll definitely revisit it later on. But I mean, I think that experiences like this belong to the victims. And I think if you know, if a joke is where it needs to go,
Right.
you know, I do think that's highly feminist. I have
Yeah.
a poem in the book called A Joke.
Yeah.
And I didn't even think about that connection, but thank you for making it.
Yeah. I mean, my reading was that the title was Rape Joke, but it was nothing but a joke in her poem. It was all
Right.
about, you know, the pain and the abuse of it, the trauma of it.
Mhm. Yeah.
My sense is that we can take a moment again to say, Jenny, amazing. Thank you so much for celebrating your book with us, for sharing your words, and for letting us be part of your first one, and also of such a momentous week. I want to congratulate both Jenny and Johnny
Oh,
on
thanks.
getting engaged. And then we will move towards open mic. I do want to say that I will be pausing the recording per somebody's request. And I'm coming to you, Cal. I've got Cal, Donna, Karen, Julian, and Laura, just to let people know.
I'm gonna read a poem from my book, and this cover is by my grandchildren with organizational help by my daughter, who's actually a professional artist. My grandchildren are not. And the poem is called Impact, and it was actually tied with Karen in a contest a number of years ago. And I'm gonna try to share it since we, it's sharing's disabled, that's no problem. Okay. Impact. Eddies of thin fog rise on urban moonscape, black top, lot still hot. El Yunes, 80% full, moon day, blue lights haze high lit with strobes, illuminate lot. Cops watch 5 guys face down in mulch. Question 1, foot stuck out of van, sweats rolled to knee. Corner world swirls, hurried patrons cross gum stuck concrete aprons. At counter, chunky young crew cut cop buys monster, says, all I know is I pulled in and my buddy says, stand by this dude. If he runs, catch him. Next shopper saw 5 men prone in a row in pine mulch, face down, cuffed. Tedessa says there was a fight. But at 1 a.m., it's quiet. Ethiopian, oh, what do you know? I ran out of poem here. I'm gonna have to, I'll look up the rest of them, sorry. By 1 a.m., it's quiet. Tad, the Ethiopian anthropologist, is bagging trash. Now there's a siren and more lights, an EMT truck followed by a very big fire rig, more cops. He works the register line down from 3 to none and walks out, turns the corner to where she said the fight was, sees a lady being helped out of a dirty moon-hued Honda, turns to a fireman and asks, what happened? The man just shrugs. Tad makes a note to the day crew that the owner of the car is probably at Wake Med, no name. It's 2:45, dead leaves wander between the pumps. The waning gibbous, 80% full, is going down. A pale green Luna moth is spinning on its nose, then soars up a foot, banks, stalls, and crashes. Shaped like a B-52 with B-1 stealth swept wings. There's a war on somewhere, winding down so another one can wind up, and the brains of Africa are oozing out of there into here. He thinks he read a letter Ken Patchen wrote to God in 1958 saying, we are things of the same kind. Did Ken say that or God? Raises his head when tires scream, sliding through the red light. Thank you.
Thank you, Cal. I'll make sure you check the chat section. There's some comments for you. I'm coming to you, Donna. And Ron, I think you had said you were going to read. So I've added you to the list. Hey, Donna.
Okay. I rarely write poems that rhyme, but this one seemed to be one that was begging for rhyme. It's called A Collect Call from Your Wife. Hello, Charlie. Were you hurt? I remember ripping your shirt and patients clapping and screaming and doctors slapping me into an empty room full of nightmares. It is 6 a.m. and I know what time it is without memorizing the clock. I take my Thorazine and I'm calm and serene. Oh, so serene. Loudspeakers don't call me names, and I know who's insane and who has keys. I don't care about nuclear war or my neighbor's soul. And if you take me home, I promise not to do anything exciting.
Damn, girl.
It's
Oh,
hard
love
to read when you're the abuser after all those poems, but
Yeah, empty room full of nightmare. Thank you, Donna. Ron, I'll come to you and then I will head to Karen, Julian, and Laura. Oh, now I forgot who I'm going to. Somebody let me know where he is.
I'm here.
I found you.
Sorry. But back to word. Okay, small graces. The rope let down when you stumble into the crevice. The smoke curl shanty on the never-ending trail. Your old sidekick galloping up when you're riding solo. The earth whispering a secret in your ear. I don't know the name, the shadow that bides at the bottom of everything. But I know how suddenly the water surges from her well and how cool it feels going down.
Ooh, gorgeous.
Yeah.
I love the earth whispering a secret in your ear. Yeah, but oh, so Karen and I wrote that at the same time. Karen, you and I get on that kit. I'm coming your way.
All right. Am I unmuted? I think I
Yes,
am.
ma'am.
Yeah.
You are live.
Okay. Okay. So this, I'm obsessing over Ted Kuzer's poetry. Well, I've been obsessing over his poetry for years, but anyway, I've been reading his book, Winter Walks, usually just one poem at a time because they're so delicious. So this is in response to the one that I read yesterday. What flew to me? It wasn't the actual notes sung so far from the road and so heart-strung by an unseen cardinal that day that reached me. It was the 6 rowdy syllables written in the simile of the mouth noise of wannabe cowboys making sounds to accompany their shooting toy guns, sounding the same as that bird song that flew into me as magic as a breath, that was written by you from March 1 of 1999 into me in March 1 of 2023. As you said, Ted, that song had the force of the season, the force of spring behind it. But what I must tell you is that what gave it wing was your poem, Finding Me, on the page.
Oh, it's gorgeous. Yeah, once again, we've got fire for open mic, guys. Thank y'all so much for reading. Julian, I'm coming your way. And the music in that, spot on, gorgeous. Hi, Julian.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. I've cast around to think what in the earth I could read in this venue tonight. These are wonderful, wonderful poems that we started out with, and I had to cast aside a couple of ideas that I had brought with me But I'll read this. This is my father. My father participated in the fall of the Philippines, died in World War II. The last time I saw him, I was 4 years old. This poem is called Bataan Memorial for my father. In the picture books, I see a face as public as the president's. I have 3 glimpses of you living. One has to do with fireworks, a summer memory, if memory at all. Then 2, you dressed my foot where the nail went in. And finally, in 1941, you turned away. All summer memories. And it was summer when we learned how ocean buried you as deep perhaps as I, wrapped in anger, bright as the flag they sent my mother. I think of Yuri Zhivago howling on his father's grave mound. If I should meet you at some watershed, would you die a second time to give me back my grief? I fear all turnings now. As padding these winter wolf tracks, my stiffened heart turns and turns, stalking you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. That is just powerful. Yep, I have to say, oh yeah, read the chat sections, Julian. Laura, we are coming to you. And again, I'll just say, y'all know this open mic's always fire.
Thanks. Well, I might put the fire out, who knows? I wrote this a little while ago after serving on a jury last year for one of the Syrian men who held American and UK hostages and among other nationalities and killed several people. This is called The Jury Serves. We're here for the dead, to bring families closure, to hear the stories of the stolen lives. The nightmare is still there, but loses some of its punch, its pain. And yet the bones turn to dust in the desert. We cannot bring them home, give loved ones something to hold or a place to visit for conversations with the dead. Verdict returned, a small measure of validation, a sip, but still no graves to visit. Their bones scored by desert into sand, lifted by dry winds, are grit in the eyes of the unbeliever. Thank you.
You didn't put the fire out, you just put gasoline on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, grit in the eyes of the unbeliever. All right, guys. Jenny, thank you so much. Everybody who read tonight, everybody who was here and asked questions or just held space. Thank you.
Thank
If
you
you want to
all
get her
so
book,
much.
Thank you.
go to LSU Press. All right, guys. Be well.
Well,
Thanks.